Majlis 95. Between local lines, notes from the Emirate.
Notes from the Emirate indeed, between local lines but international events. It is the International Women's Day, and to celebrate such a wonderful occasion, we're very, very delighted and extremely honoured to have the presence as well of Dr. Susan Mumm, who is the Chancellor of the American University of Sharjah. Dr. Susan, thank you very much for joining us this morning as we celebrate such an important occasion. How important is the International Women's Day from an academics perspective and also a leader in the educational field as well?
I think International Women's Day is important for a number of reasons. First of all, the very fact that it's international. While we are usually most aware of the contributions of women to our own societies, International Women's Day reminds us that women contribute globally. And I think when I think about International Women's Day, I think about two things. First, I think about contributions, whether those contributions be economic, cultural, political, or societal. But it's also about ensuring that opportunities for women remain open and, in fact, even increase. So International Women's Day looks back at what's been achieved, but we also look forward at what still needs to change in our societies.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, International Women's Day, it's of course not the only day out of the 365 days in a year in which to celebrate women's achievements, for sure. This should be done every single day. And it's definitely a symbolic day to draw attention to the importance of women's rights and women's empowerment, as well as to observe all of women's great feats throughout history. Which brings me to my question. Now, I want to talk about women's underrepresentation in leadership in particular. Now, some stats, they show that managerial and leadership positions, they continue to be male-dominated, with women only holding approximately 27% of managerial roles. And this year, the theme of the International Women's Day, it's breaking the bias. What is your take on this in particular?
I think this is an important theme especially around the question of leadership, because we know that the old excuses about why women aren't leaders don't hold true anymore. Because the classic excuse was, well, women haven't been in the workplace as much as men, or women don't have the same level of education as men. Those things simply aren't true anymore. So we have to look more deeply and say, are there unthinking, unwitting biases that we've absorbed as part of our cultural education that are blocking women from reaching the leadership positions? And when you mentioned 27%. In my own field, which is higher education, only about 20% of universities are led by women in North America, for example. Mm-hmm. As far as I know, I'm the only woman leading a coeducational university in the UAE, and that's got to change. It's important that the next generation of women leaders take leadership for granted. That's a real luxury, to be able to say, I'm not a pioneer. I'm doing something normal for a woman, and I'm leading because I'm excellent at my job and I'm committed to my job, and the fact that I'm a woman is largely irrelevant.
And can you also talk to us about the importance of promoting gender diversity in both education and work setting as well? Why is that positive? Because a lot of people are trying to wrap their minds around these ideas, even to this day.
I think it's important because we don't live in a world where we can afford to squander talent. This world is not in great shape. We need all the talent of everybody who's available to us. And that means we can't automatically discount a proportion of the population based on their gender, based on their skin tones, based on their age, based on their ability, like in terms of disability or being able-bodied. So we need all the talent we can get, and that means we need women as well. One of the events that's happening at AUS today is in the College of Engineering, which of course, although 30% of our undergraduate students in engineering are women, that's very high. It's still not 50% or anything like it. So, we need to keep helping people break down barriers that are largely unconscious and largely unwitting about what kind of leadership women should have.
Right, and let's talk about that, STEM and engineering in particular, because you brought it up. It's definitely a very important discussion to have, because there are really so many layers to this. Why it's 30%, for instance, and it goes, for instance, there are cultural reasons, perhaps parents as well, maybe even teachers and professors themselves, and sort of the influence they have on a classroom and the things they say that they may not consciously be aware of, but might be discouraging to a lot of people as well. So let's start by talking about that. What is being done at the American University of Sharjah in particular to promote women's involvement in STEM and engineering? And perhaps if you could also touch on those other factors as well, because that's not something that a single institution can escape. There are so many factors at play here.
I think that's a really important question. I think what I would say about AUS is that we were founded as a coeducational university, and that was sent a very important statement back 25 years ago when we were established, that this was going to be a place of opportunity for women as well as for men. And so we're proud of that tradition, and what that means in STEM is that we try to ensure that we have enough role models that are female, because if you don't see people like yourself doing jobs, you tend not to aspire to those jobs. So we try to ensure that we have as many female professors as we possibly can in the classrooms, that the leadership of the university includes women as well as men. I want women who are students or potential students to look around their engineering classroom or their math classroom or their English classroom and say, yeah, it's natural for women to be in charge sometimes, just like it's natural for men to be in charge sometimes. And at AUS, more than half of our undergraduate students are women. And we're very, very proud of that. And we see that as being part of an international trend where more and more women are seeing higher education as the route into leadership for them.
I like the fact that you've got this message also going on a global platform, because you've got a dedicated event that you're taking part in Expo 2020 Dubai at the Women's Pavilion on the 11th of March. Talk to us about the key messages that you've got for that event, and why should people be attending and look forward to taking part in that conference?
Well, the event will follow the International Women's Day theme for 2022, which is breaking the bias. And that is the key message for this year, because of course, bias is about those everyday unthinking assumptions we make about what other people's capabilities and what other people's talents are. And it's usually based on no real knowledge, it's based on bias. And we have to get beyond that in the world of 2022 and ensure that everybody has the opportunity to show whatever talent they've got, regardless of who they are or what body they were born into. So what we're going to be doing at Expo is having speakers from within the university, some of our very eminent faculty, like our Nargis Bubari, our Dean of our School of Business Administration, one of the very few women leading a business school in the UAE. We'll have our coordinator for women's studies. I think AUS was the first university in the region to even offer an academic program in women's studies. We have a chair in leadership studies. We have some fantastic people from industry and from the private sector. The general manager of brand development will be with us. Women who are serial entrepreneurs will be joining us. And also women who work in areas that are still quite male-dominated, such as female partners in real estate firms, which is still an area for growth for women here. So the idea is to have women from the private sector, from the public sector, and from academia to talk about how we can create the world that we want our daughters and our sons to live in, which is a world without bias.
Absolutely. Women's empowerment is not only for the benefit of one gender over the other, it's definitely about ultimately elevating society as a whole. So in celebrating International Women's Day that lies on the March 8th of every year, we're celebrating today, obviously, the fullness of womanity, not just humanity. So we would like to get your final message to all women out there who are listening to you.
When you're given an opportunity, say yes. Don't say no, even if you're afraid. That's an inborn bias that a lot of us have, and we have to work on our own biases as well as working on the biases of the society around us.
Well, what a wonderful way to sum it all up. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts with us on the Morning Majlis.
My pleasure.
We were listening to Dr. Susan Mumm, who is the Chancellor of the American University of Sharjah, who very kindly joined us this morning on the programme to celebrate the important occasion of the International Women's Day. You're listening to the Morning Majlis. We shall return right after the news headlines.
If you liked this episode of the Morning Majlis, drop a like and subscribe.
95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.